Yeah, I also would like to say thank you to the organizers for giving me this opportunity to speak. As a theologian, I'm very honored to be able to speak in this chapel. For quite a number of years, I have been writing about that I don't think we really have a political crisis in the West, even though everything today is about politics, but that we have a spiritual crisis. And people are really looking for salvation in politics, but they only find security politics, crisis management, and economic growth. And that's not really anything you can base your life on. But I think when we talk about the Christian revival, I think there are two groups. Number one, they are quite loud. These are the people that are out in the streets. They have rediscovered Christianity in the defense of Western civilization. They are the people waving the flag, showing up at Unite the Kingdom. And that is Christianity treated primarily as civilizational identity marking, rather than a demanding moral doctrine. It's less about belief, more about heritage, borders, and cohesion. And it doesn't require faith, only loyalty. You could say that these people are kind of political activists. Then there are group two. They're more silent. Those are the ones searching for the truth, transcendence, clarity, and substance. It's primarily Generation Z, and their parents have not been able to provide them any answers to the big questions of life. So they're looking for metaphysics, transcendence. And I talked to quite a number of them because I'm a convert to Catholicism myself many years ago, so I feel like their story also reflects my story. And what they tell me is that they feel this inner emptiness, and they're looking for a higher moral authority because they're tired of trying to find all the answers themselves. And they also have realized that voting harder doesn't really help because everybody thinks with the next election, with the next new political leader, everything is going to change. But no matter how hard you vote, people have realized, and I also think in this country, that nothing is really going to change. But I want to add that it's not only in the Christian civilization that this is happening, it's actually also happening among Muslims. An unprecedented number of Muslims in the Muslim world, in the Middle East, is actually converting to Christianity. And the ironic part is when they come to the Western world, they become more radicalized in the Islamic faith. But in their own countries, where it's very dangerous to become a Christian, we see so many Muslims converting to Christianity. And I want to come back to that because I think it's time for us now to ask whether the Muslims could be part of the Christian revival and what that would do to our civilization. So I'm going to come back to that. But I want to say a little bit more about these two groups because the first group, which are the political activists, they are very concerned about saving the civilization. And this is, you know, a phrase you would hear in many conferences today, we have to save the civilization. But the other group who are looking for the truth, they are more concerned about saving their souls. And I think that is crucial because it was the time when the Western civilization stopped to be more concerned about their souls and more concerned about the civilization that everything went wrong. And I think we really have to be very mindful of that. Since the French Revolution, we have sort of had the state as the sovereign entity in our civilization, not God. But I think actually now what's happening with the Christian revival cannot be explained just by social trends or because people are tired of the political situation or their parents could not provide any answers. I actually do think that God is acting, that God has taken pity on our generation and our apostasy. So he's trying to reach out now. And it's a very important moment because I think it really matters how we respond to that. And try to reflect on what does God want us to do in this particular moment in history. And that brings me to my next point. What is Christian culture? Christian culture, I would say, is a byproduct. It's not a goal in itself. It was created by people who put God first and who wanted to go to heaven. And to go to heaven, you had to lead a holy life, a sacred life. You need to, all the old kings like Charlemagne, he understood that he only had power because he had to, build a sacred order for people to reach salvation and go to heaven. And he was very aware, I'm very occupied with Charlemagne for the time being, that he was under the judgment of God, that he was not the highest authority, whereas the state today looks at itself like it is God. And, honestly, I don't think that the state right now is doing a very good job pretending to be God. But Charlemagne was very, very aware that he would be judged by himself, how he had exercised his power. And he needed to, establish this sacred order. So it was also made by people who worked for the greater glory of God. And you only have to look at this hall and this cathedral to understand what I mean. And Rod talked about it yesterday when he entered the Cathedral of Chartres. And I think that it's very important right now to be reminded that Europe is built not only on human achievement, but on God's grace. And that is the heart of Christianity, God's grace. And St. Thomas Aquinas says in the Summa that grace does not remove nature, but brings it to perfection. That God would never destroy our nature, but perfects it. It means we, of course, have our natural faculties like reason, will, moral action, and even the skills to make art. But it all comes in a cooperation with God's grace. And I think this is what we have forgotten. It doesn't mean that societies are perfect, because we will still have human sin and error. But still, grace can work through natural human culture. And you even have that in the Oxford University motto, Dominus illuminatum mea, God is my light. It means that divine guidance and spiritual light, you have to rely on that to get a deeper knowledge of the world, and it all derives from God. And I think it is extremely important that Christianity permeates every level and fabric of society and influence lawmaking, culture, art, schools. But we have to resist the temptation right now to immediately turn this Christian revival into a new political program, because that is actually secular thinking. And what I think we have to sort of learn now how to go from secular thinking to what I would say is sacred thinking. And that is actually to put the soul first and not the civilization and not politics. And that's, very, very hard for us, because we're so trained now to think in secular terms that everything has to be translated into politics. And that's a big temptation right now. So I think that we need politicians and also people in general, lay people, who are willing to let God's grace work through them, which has always been the principle in Christianity. Democracy is in a deep crisis because it has lost its telos. It means a higher purpose, which can only come from a transcendent power like God. I think many politicians today feel that we only have, like, as I said before, security politics has sort of replaced salvation, and crisis management and economic growth, which is materialistic. So I think we need Christian leaders. People want leaders. You see now people voted for Trump because they wanted a strong leader, and I think many people today are disillusioned because he was seen as, the savior of the Western civilization in many ways, and he did not keep his promises. I won't go into that, but I think many people know now you cannot put your hope in a human person. You need a transcendent power to survive in this world and to combat evil. We're also in a big spiritual warfare between good and evil, and only to rely on politics is too fragile. You need something higher than that. So, but since we are so trained to think in secular terms, I think for many people it takes a lot of courage to stand up and talk about their faith, first of all. And I really, really would like to hear more from politicians, or see politicians that are not concerned about the next election, but would simply stand up for truth and moral order and a sacred order. And I think actually they would get a lot of votes, because people are longing so much for authenticity. and for somebody who just dares to speak the truth, not thinking about what would my voters think about me. I think we really need politicians that have that courage to be witnesses for their faith. Because I think I see in my circles, whenever somebody articulate their faith, people suddenly say, oh yes, you're so right, but they don't have the terminology. Many people today come from families where they have never talked about God, so they don't know the words and the concepts. So that's why it's very, very important that everybody, like Mary Harrison said yesterday, don't be embarrassed, just talk about it. Also when you are at work or when you have a dinner, it's not only politicians. But I would like to come back here in my last part of my talk to the conversion of Muslims. I think it's very, very interesting if Islam could be a part of this revival, because we see Muslims as our enemies. But I see a lot of people that actually do want to believe in God, but for me, as a Christian, I see that they are misled about who's God. And I just written an article for the next issue of the European Conservative about this. And I raised the question, what would Europe have looked like today if we had sent pastors and priests to asylum centers just 20, 30 years ago? Not to have forced conversions, of course, but just to have a conversation about who is God. Right now, I'm in contact with a new network of young Muslims that have converted to Catholicism in London. And they told me that they don't see Christianity as the city on the hill in the Western world. But they said to me, if more Muslims could see Christianity as vibrant and really serious about their faith, many more Muslims would convert to Christianity. Because one of them told me that his family has been here for several generations, and they were quite respectful of the Christian culture before everything just began really to decline. But now when they see this decline and Christianity is something with naked women, people going out drinking, not taking their faith seriously, they would rather become Muslim. So that's a big challenge for us. And it's actually liberalism and godlessness that drives them into radical Islam. It's not so much about the strength of Islam, it's about the weakness of the Christians. I've said that for many years. And I do believe if they saw a better example, many of them would be open to become Christians. Because if you have an encounter with the love of Christ, why would you want to be a Muslim? And that's what they all tell. And what is interesting also that many of them have these visions and those dreams where Christ is appearing to them and he speaks to them. And they never ever doubt that he's the Son of God when that happens. So I see that God is working because these are in areas where it's very hard for Christian missionaries to enter those areas. So I think it's maybe sometimes I've been thinking about whether Islam even might be a kind of chastisement for the West. Because Martin Luther actually said that at a certain point where the Ottomans were close to Vienna, that he thought that they have reached that point because Christians were not very good Christians. But I think it's actually a wake-up call for us to rediscover our faith, and also for us to reach out to Muslims. And you might say, okay, yeah, that's just a dream. I just want to, end with reading aloud a passage from my article in the European Conservative, which is going to be published in a few weeks. But I'm sure it's okay that I read it aloud here. Because we have actually an experience from Denmark, how refugees actually wanted to go into the church when they arrived. So I'm going to read aloud here. That churches can reach Muslims and that Muslims are not inherently hostile to them is clear from a Danish experience. During the 2015 Syrian refugee wave, the church's integration service found that 70% of migrants turning to church-based meetings were Muslims. Secular authorities frequently could not or would not address their deep religious longings, leaving people alienated by cold bureaucracy. For most Muslims, faith matters far more than the democratic freedoms they are expected to embrace immediately. When local officers dismiss or reject talk of God, many naturally turn to churches for help, shared meals, legal guidance, language classes, contact families. Yet many churches, shaped by the same secular atmosphere, hesitate to move beyond practical aid and speak openly about God and the gospel. What if evangelization had been a natural part of that welcome? Might many have chosen Christ over Muhammad, sparing themselves and Western societies much heartache? Research consistently shows that Christian migrants and those who come to the faith in Christ face fewer integration challenges. So I would end on that note, and I think it's, when I think about all these young Muslims, when I see them in the streets of London and in Denmark, what if they all became Christians? Because they're already believers. I think then the revival could be really great, and I think there is a lot of potential in that, and I would say that politicians should, at least allocate money to those projects in churches where they could invite Muslims to at least talk about who is God. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of our speakers for their fascinating talks. This is the political session, so I'm going to be radically democratic and suggest that we dive straight into Q&A from you, the audience. There are a couple of microphones that will come round, so if you would like to start us off with the first question, I can see a hand here. A microphone is about to appear.
Thank you. Yes, one of the terms that seems to have been spoken of a bit like a phantom over the last 2 days is Christian nationalism. And my question to the panel would be, in light of the Great Commission, the call to disciple the nations, or Christianize them, in light of the globalist secular context we've been discussing, and in light of the adjective Christian actually meaning Christian, why would you have a problem with Christian nationalism if you do, if that makes sense? You might want to define Christian nationalism as you understand it.
Who would like to dive in on that particular question? Diederik, you look like you're about to...
It's a very good question. I mean, nationalism, the term, at least in Dutch, has a negative connotation. People will say patriotism rather than nationalism, because nationalism will remind them of what I think someone said, like, my country, my mother drunk or sober. How did Chesterton say? Well, but the thing is, I think a true politics of home is always also about our national home, and that the nation state is a great product of Christian civilization, because basically you can form an identity in several ways. You can form a tribal identity, which you all have the fiction of a common ancestor. Well, that's a very closed system, because you cannot really join another tribe in that way. Or you can have a purely religious identity, which is formed on sharing the same faith. But what the achievement of the nation state in the West is, as Roger Scruton has explained in The West and the Rest, is this idea of the nation state as a common home, which is very open and people can join that. And I think, so in that sense, that is the sense that we need to recover, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit dangerous because Christianity...
It's not you, hold on. We get back to Evan's microphone. It's on.
Okay. Christianity is universal, and we have to keep in mind that
What actually created Europe was Christianity that was binding together different nation states. And then, of course, at that time was the Pope as the sign of unity between everybody. Being a Catholic, and I come from a very Protestant background, Denmark is a very Protestant, very anti-Catholic country, I see the difference. Because if the government breaks down, or if it is the nation state where sort of Christianity is incorporated into that, the government can sort of neglect the covenant, or they can, go into some kind of apostasy. But if you have something higher where the Pope does not submit to any secular power and is a sign of unity, you still have a moral structure, you still have spiritual authority over the state. And this is, of course, a problem, throughout history between state and church. But I think right now we see so many, for instance, in Denmark, and that was one of the reasons why I also decided to convert. The Danish Protestant church is a state church, and it's totally absorbed into the welfare state. It has no spiritual power at all, and it is the church minister that is the head of the church and can actually decide. Now the prime minister last year decided just to abolish a holiday, which was called Great Prayer Day, and it's been a big, big controversy in Denmark. And now they sort of want it back. Maybe they want to give it back. So it is the state that is in charge of, church affairs, and that's not good. So I think it is very problematic, and I think Christianity is still what should bind all of Europe together.
So my response to that is, I went on the Tommy Robinson March last September to report it for national radio, and I was intrigued by the people on the march. Some were carrying pennants with Bible verses on them: Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life. People were carrying icons of Christ, images of the saints, St. George flags, all the rest of it. And the challenge that I was given by the radio station was to ask what was I assumed, or they'd assumed, were Christians, to explain what they were doing there. And I asked the same question of everybody, how you explain your presence here when you meet your black or Asian brother or sister in Christ at church tomorrow, because over half of all Christians in London are black or Asian. And I was really intrigued by the different responses. To the young man carrying the pennant with the Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life on his on the Bible verse, he said, "Well, I'm not going to be at church tomorrow." I kind of thought, that's fine. He worships God in his bedroom or wherever. So I asked him the next question, "But you're a Christian, right?" And he said, "Well, no, I'm not." I was kind of, what? And of the third of the people I interviewed, a third said the same thing. They were carrying these icons, carrying these banners, carrying these, Bible verses on pennants. It wasn't even like they were being ambiguous. Some were cultural Christians, others were active Christians. And I began to ask myself the question, where does this idea of Christian nationalism get? There was a moment when the phrase, "he's a lefty," was shouted out, and I got chased and punched. It was a difficult setup, and I had to leg it through the crowd. But I wanted to reflect, and I've been reading a book called Chosen Peoples by Anthony D. Smith. And he actually says this phrase, nationalism, and I'll just quote it actually. Sacred belief, he says, is central to national identity, even in a secular, globalized world. And he says actually that it is religious belief itself from which we originate the idea of nationhood. The earliest use of the term nationalism in the English language, Professor Smith says, appeared during the mid-19th century to express the doctrine of the divine election of a nation. Indeed, Victorian Britain's imperial mission was, from one angle, mainly an extension of this belief in national chosenness. So we ought to take away from the Robinsons or the Lows of this world who have described forms of ethno-nationalism. Actually, I want to qualify Robinson. He doesn't say that, but you might argue that Low does. By saying that underneath it is a sense of the sacred. Let's interrogate what that means and hold them to account for it.
I have no problem with Christian nationalism as a term. In the heart of contemporary debates, we have got these two fundamental questions about the rejection of faith and the rejection of nationhood, and what you can feel in the European political trends, the strengthening of patriotism and conservatism, and this Christian revival is the re-emergence of the importance of both, of faith and nationhood. And I believe that they are also important to reflect to each other. If we look at our Christian faith, it is not without, even in the Bible, even in the Old Testament, it is not without the partiality of national identity. Jesus was crying for Jerusalem, wasn't he? Or the chosen people in the Old Testament reflect how important it was. But at the same time, we could see that this partiality was not without universalism at the same time. Yeah. And because obviously whole Christianity and the New Testament is about that kind of universalism of Christ and redemption. This is from that perspective, that how we relate to each other, the two is important, because it is not Christianity plus nationalism, but the nationalism should be Christian, and our Christianity should be open to the values of nationhood and universalism at the same time. So I think it is very important that we relate the two concepts to each other, and we reflect openness. When the contemporary major global debates we are identifying, end of international law, unilateralism of the United States, and so on, I think this is also very important to look at Christianity as something which keeps together our civilization. It is not just the international law what keeps us together, but the heart of the international law, as we understand it, reflected in the UN Charter, we have got Christianity as the heart of it. So I believe that for the answer is not just repeating the importance of international law, but let's go deeper and beyond. Thank you.
Can we have some more questions, please? I see Rod has his hand up here.
Use that.
Yeah.
Hi, one of the most important things I've ever heard about politics was said by Prime Minister Viktor Orban. He said that people look to politicians for meaning. He said, but politics can't give us meaning. He said, I'm a politician, I can give you things, by which I took him to mean laws, subsidies, things like that. He said, the institutions that do give meaning, churches, schools, arts organizations, families, and so forth, if they don't step into the public space opened up by politics and do their job, then anything that politics might accomplish for the good won't last. Now, I think of that all the time, because so many people today think that restoring the culture is simply a matter of voting the right people in, and that's clearly not the case. I'd like the panel to reflect on Prime Minister Orban's point about the relationship between politics and meaning, and other institutions needing to step up and do their work of proclaiming meaning, revealing meaning, and forming souls.
Who wants to go first? No, let's do it. Well, Viktor Orban, I have to.
Speak for Hungary.
You know, with Viktor Orban, we have. Do I need this or not, Jonathan?
You're fine with the radio. Yeah.
I don't need it.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So, Viktor Orban, we have established Fidesz in 1988 together. A few of us, and as you know, he is Prime Minister of Hungary for 16 years, and we have become a kind of laboratory in the past 16 years, how to put into reality these ideas that you have just developed. And as you said, this kind of commitment to create favorable conditions. Let's talk about the churches, just to narrow down your question to this aspect. At the end of communism in Hungary, there was no church education because the communists have terminated and nationalized all church institutions in 1945. And that happened behind the Iron Curtain everywhere. In the past decades, we have been able to return the schools to churches. And now over 20% of the Hungarian public education is in church institutions. It couldn't be more because that was the ability of the churches to take back these institutions. But I have to tell you that my kids, I'm a Protestant, my kids went to a Catholic church because there was no Protestant church in the neighborhood, the school in the neighborhood, but 3 times as many kids are applying for the church schools than the state ones. So this probably is a good example what I'm talking about. In my congregation, in a district of Budapest, my local community, the local Protestant church, a couple of years ago decided that, okay, let's move into this service. And now they have created 2 new kindergartens, 1 elementary school, and 1 high school. And now over 1,000 kids study in these 4 institutions, maintained by a small Protestant congregation of 400 people, because this is not a big church. 400 taxpayers are there. But what the state did was very important, because the state decided that that kind of subsidy which is given to the state schools is going to be given to the church schools as well. And in this regard, there is a full equality how the state and the church institutions are treated by the state. And this was the precondition for this, because otherwise the financial conditions wouldn't exist. So these were 2 examples how I think this can be put into practice, what Viktor Orbán said on a theoretical level. Thank you.
To answer the question, I think that Viktor needs to continue to do more work in his catechism and in his thinking. The model of the Hungarians are pursuing is commendable, and the Hungarian constitution is of great interest. But in its conceptual framework, it still rules according to the human, or even I might say liberal understanding of government. What I mean by that is that it's not a transcendent constitution. It's a means of transfer of ideas. But the human transfer of ideas is not part of the English covenantal or even biblical model. If Professor Oliver O'Donovan was here, he might remind us, or I might invite him to remind us, of what he wrote in Desire of the Nations, page 82. He says that we need to see politics as the theatre of the divine self-disclosure. The theatre of the divine self-disclosure. That accounts for, and I'm grateful that the Reverend Helen Orr picked us up on this in her intervention yesterday when she spoke about the possibility of divine intervention in human affairs. And it's that politicians should be reaching out for. So although I welcome the English and indeed the Hungarian transmissions of the mechanisms of the transfer of values or ideals, including Christian ones, it's something deeper and more profound that's required at this moment, and I think which Iben actually in her presentation was touching upon. The idea of God responding to human volition by means of blessing, the covenantal model, or by means of discipline, also the covenantal model. And I would pass the mic now to my Dutch friend to introduce us to perhaps say a few comments about a Calvinist way of looking at this as well, because the Dutch, in many ways, have modelled this.
Let's see if this works first. Well, I think it does. Yes, although I'm Catholic myself, but I wasn't really sure about. Yeah. But I think, specifically in Calvinist countries, we seem to have this strange religion without God that is overtaken politics. I think we're in a kind of hyper-political age, in the sense that I find that the Christian tradition, the Christian politicians, the Christian parties are the least religious in their political manifestations compared to all the other parties. Because for as a Christian Democrat, for example, you tend to view politics as, okay, we'll have to balance all these different interests and values and come up with something where we all agree on something. It's a pragmatic approach in this sense to politics. Sorry about, I don't know what's going on. But, yeah. But on the other hand, you see from the left, there's all these political religions coming in now. So politics has become dominated by, it's more about, it's religious emotions that take over. So it's about an enemy and a friend. It's about regarding the other as pure or impure. It's like saying, I am the good person, you are a bad person, you are wrong. So it's all these religions and emotions are everywhere now, and this is and particularly among with the withdrawal of actual Christianity from politics.
Yeah, I would like to ask a counter question.
Because is it really the role of the state or institutions to bring this formation? I think it actually starts in the family. And the biggest problem in European civilization is that families are so broken. In 2 weeks, we have an election, or the next election in Denmark, and now, of course, following the campaign. And Danes are like small kids. They want the states to take care of all their affairs. For instance, we have a huge mental crisis among our young children and young adults. And everybody, all parents say, it is the system that has failed. The system has failed us. So, you know, the young people, they learn it's not mom and dad who's going to help me, it is the system. And the system is being asked to provide something it cannot provide. So I think actually the responsibility starts in the family, and that is the biggest problem. And I think, for instance, in Denmark, the reason why so many people get divorced, every second marriage in Denmark ends in a divorce. And that's because the state provides, so you don't need a partner anymore. A woman today can get a child with the state because she can go to any clinic and get inseminated and get a child, and the state will pay for it. She doesn't need a man. And that's a huge problem because when the families are broken, if you see that the family is the image of the Trinity, the mother, the father, and the child, there is something in our relationship with God that is broken because the family is so broken. And I'm sorry, because I know a lot of you might be divorced, and I'm not judging you. I'm just saying that our culture is deeply sick because the family is so broken.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I promised despotic timekeeping, and I will hold myself to that promise, because I'm aware that lots of you will be looking forward to your lunch break. But can we please finish by thanking our panel for their excellent talks? Jonathan Price is now going to say a few words, thanking you all for coming and letting you know about more things happening at Pusey.
Thank you so much. We will liberate you from this revival meeting to go out in the world and to do the good work and to spread the faith in a moment. But just before that, for those of us who are joining, Pusey House from time to time offers a safe space. Not only in that sense, but in the original sense of a space where conversations can be had that are hard to have elsewhere. And some British politicians, along with some friends from Europe, some national journalists and others, are going to continue speaking about this in the afternoon in closed quarters, where they might decide to become friends, to be friendly with one another, and to do things. So not a conspiracy, but a co-spiracy. That's a new word, there we are. So Christians coming together and asking, what can we do for the national life of Britain in a place where it's safe to speak about it openly with one another, and we're providing that. We've provided it in the past to academics, and even from time to time to some of the bishops within the Church of England who've asked us for that kind of space, and we're happy to do that. Lunch for those joining is provided, and for the staff of Danube and Pusey in the hood room just after this. The next conference like this, that is large scale, all in, multi-day, will be the 17th through the 19th of June, and that will be on natural law and war. But importantly, it will also be on the harder thing, which is not just war, but just peace. So do come out for that. That will be members of the Academy, it will be military chaplains, it will be representatives of various military organizations, it will be those who supply troops with things they need, it will be people like you and me. So that will be open to the public like this, 17th through the 19th of June here. We have a lot going on next term. Our term card should be published next week. Father George, I don't want to say this with in the weeks to come, our term card will be released on the website with a lot going on next term, including conferences that you can already book, such as What Makes a Novel Christian, with some novelists and those like myself, aspiring novelists, right? We have a story to tell. Come out and see if we can tell it in the Christian Register. That being said, this has been recorded. Videos of it will show up online on the Danube website and on Pusey's YouTube in the coming weeks. If you want to send that out to anyone far and wide, please do. And check out our poll, which is still fresh. It's showing up in different places, that Britain is unwilling to become more secular and maybe is curious to maintain its Christian legacy and heritage within the Constitution. With that being said, on behalf of Father George, the trustees at Pusey House, the chapter, the greater chapter, the Danube Institute, and all of us, thank you for being here, and we hope to see you very soon. We are open every day for worship. Thank you.